switch there. It switches on and off the power cable outside the bird room, which keeps away any rodent, rat, mouse, meerkat, whatever might come to my property and try and get into my bird room. You'll get a surprise of 3,000 volts.
According to BirdLife International, it is estimated that there are only 2,500 Gouldians left in the wild. This species has been classified as endangered, and research is currently being done in Australia on how to possibly restock the bird back into the wild. A similar conservation program was done with the Hawaiian geese, as seen here. At one stage, there were only 30 left in the world. They were then successfully bred in captivity and have now been restocked back into the wild on the Hawaiian Islands. A lot of people don't know about the contribution that bird keepers, or aviculturists as they are called, have made to nature conservation. If you refer to the 6th edition of the internationally acclaimed Austin Roberts book on the birds of Southern Africa, it openly acknowledges the fact that nesting and incubation data sourced from captive bred birds was used where information from the wild was unknown or not available. In addition to this, many members of the public are not aware of the fact that photographs and texts, as in this case with the outstanding publication on the complete book of Southern African birds, were sometimes supplied by aviculturists. Here you see a photograph and write-up on the pied mannequin supplied by Mr. Neville Brickhill from the Indigenous Bird Breeders Research Group, which is based in KwaZulu-Natal. In South Africa, if we include the indigenous finch species, it is estimated that there are some 200-odd different finch species kept in captivity. Of that, 65 or so would be local indigenous species, and the balance of 145-odd would be foreign or exotics, as they are normally referred to. Local indigenous finches, as seen here, may not be kept in captivity unless one has a permit from Nature Conservation. In terms of the 145-odd exotic finches that can be seen in South African aviaries, many of them can be purchased from the more reputable bird and pet shops. In South Africa, you can also subscribe to the excellent monthly specialist magazine for bird keepers called Amazandium. This magazine, which also has a website, can be bought from selected pet shops, or you can subscribe to it by simply filling in the enclosed subscription form in your DVD video cover. From here we move to the breeding facility of Elko Meyers, who has a combination of purpose-built aviaries, a bird room and some standard garden aviaries to house and breed his wide collection of finches that can be purchased from any of the bird shops. When it comes to outdoor housing, it is important to ensure that your aviaries have well-built foundations and flooring. Rodents will become a pest if you do not take the correct precautionary steps to eliminate this hazard. Consider inserting zinc sheeting in the side walls of the foundations. This will provide an underground screen panel for those rodents that burrow through bricks and mortar. For the flooring, you can take old glass bottles and crush them in a drum, as seen here, and then spread it on the surface area before putting your wire mesh on for strengthening. Finally, it can be covered with concrete. Make sure that the concrete has a proper runoff area so that there is good drainage. Most ready-made aviaries in South Africa use a 2.5 cm by 1 cm mesh size, which is very practical and economical. If you're going to build your own aviary, then you should perhaps consider using a 1 cm by 1 cm mesh size. While this size is slightly more expensive, it keeps small rodents out of your aviary more effectively. Another way to eliminate rodents is to install the electric fence terminal with a live wire running around the base of your aviary. It should have a high amperage current running through it. Whilst building safety flight areas may be considered a costly luxury, Elko believes it is well worth it, should any of his rare finches escape from their aviary. The time and money spent finding a replacement bird can sometimes take months, if not years, with the rarest species of finches. While we are fortunate in South Africa to have some of the best bird keeping conditions in the world, in certain parts of the country night temperatures sometimes fall below freezing point. Before that happens, you need to ensure that your birds are well protected from the winter elements. Using roll-up covers as seen here is one way of protecting them. Using lights is another way to provide heat for those very cold nights. Here you see an inverted clay flower pot with a 40-watt bulb inside. An inverted clay dish is placed in the river sand below it. The light warms up the clay and the birds love to settle immediately below it, or sometimes perch on the top of it to keep their feet warm. This light also serves as a night light. Elke also uses infrared lamps in his breeding ovaries during the winter months to provide heat. These lights come on when the temperature falls below 10 degrees centigrade. He installs one per breeding ovary, and they have helped save many of his more sensitive species. Every keeper and breeder of finches should seriously consider having a hospital cage. The first thing a sick bird wants is heat. A very simple single breeder with a bedside lamp in front of it can be used, which should be placed in a draft-free area. The cage temperature should be approximately 32 degrees centigrade. If you have an infrared lamp that you can use, that will be so much better. The sick bird will quickly work out where it should perch for maximum comfort. This is a more elaborate hospital cage, which is thermostatically controlled. It has two 40-watt bulbs at the back of it, which come on automatically when the temperature falls below 32 degrees centigrade. It has a closed darkened front panel that retains the heat and reduces the stress level for the bird because it limits its view of the outside world. Birds always require fresh water, and this is an example of how to provide fresh water daily without having to disturb your birds by going into the ovary. The tap is conveniently positioned at waist height, and the water runs into a clay dish. The soft food and green food can be administered by means of a convenient swivel dish fixed to the ovary mesh. Charcoal, salt and grit can be served in a cocktail feeder as seen in this example. When breeding season starts in spring, live food like mealworms can be purchased from your local bird shop, or you can breed them yourself. Termites can also be dug up in the veld, but it is important to remember that you should always leave a little part of the termite mound behind, so that the remaining termites can rebuild their mound. It is advisable that you keep the termite bins in shallow water, so that the black sugar ants cannot attack the termites. Black sugar ants contain no protein and should be kept away from your finches at all times. Here are examples of convenient waist-height feeding stations fixed to the outside of each ovary. You simply open it up, insert the termites, and the birds do the rest. When it comes to breeding, it is vital that your birds be given proper nesting facilities and materials. Also, it is very important that you keep accurate records when managing your breeding program. This will help ensure that you achieve greater breeding successes. There has always been something romantic about keeping parrot finches. They've always had a particular fascination, having been brought from remote, storybook islands in the far-off Pacific Ocean. Their curious name is presumably in recognition of the fact that they are unique in the finch world because all of them have bright green, the main colour in parrots, entrenched in their plumage, and this colour is almost non-existent in all other finches. There are approximately a dozen species. This is the red-headed parrotfinch from the small island of New Caledonia. A famous English aviculturist, Norman Nicholson, concentrated on this species from 1930 on and bred over 30 generations. Breeding stocks from continental Europe and Australia, from which they can be exported, have added diversity to the genetic pool, and there are currently some good breeding stocks in our country. The crowning glory of this species is the red in the upper half of the body. The male has more red in its head mask than the female, and the red extends back past the eye in the male, whereas the eye, as seen with the female on the right, breaks the line. The male is also slightly brighter green than the female, but this can also be very difficult to determine if you cannot compare the birds side by side. It is best not to keep more than one pair per ovary, unless you have a huge ovary, because the males can become quite aggressive to other parrotfinch males in the same ovary. The The red-headed parrotfinch has now been aviary bred from limited stocks for so long that it has resulted in a certain amount of inbreeding and colour mutations are beginning to emerge. A good example is the sea green red-headed parrotfinch. The red upper parts and tail have changed into a salmon colour and the green area into a sea green shade. They make an attractive variation in the parrotfinches. Here you can clearly see the difference between a pair of red-headed parrotfinches and a pair of sea greens. If you look carefully, you will also see the two females on the inside of the perch with their eye lines breaking the colour mask, and the males on the outside with a solid colour next to the eye line on their head masks. The blue-faced parrotfinches are more widely distributed than the others and are found on mainland Australia, New Guinea and other islands. There are good breeding stocks in South Africa. All the parrotfinches frequently nest in boxes, often choosing the larger ones. They also like fruits like apples, pears, figs and pawpaws, which is unusual for finches. The male, as seen here, again will have more colour on its head mask around the eye than the female. A particularly lovely parrotfinch is the tricoloured parrotfinch. In the wild, very little is known about this particular species. The whole front is blue in two distinct shades of dark and light. Found exclusively in the remote Lesser Sunda Islands, very small numbers became available to aviculture late in the 20th century. They have bred remarkably well in both cages and aviaries, but it has been found that while they live for about 8 years, their breeding lifespan is short, seldom extending beyond their 3rd year. They should therefore be mated when they are as young as 6 months. They will breed in nest boxes, shrubs, and wire tubes, and their need for live food when breeding is not as evident as with the red and blue-faced parrotfinches seen earlier. They are also more sensitive to stress, so special care should be taken when moving the birds to different aviaries. At a casual glance, this parrotfinch, which is far rarer in captivity, may even be confused with a red-headed species. Note the important differences. It has a red bonnet, very finely outlined in black, rather than a red head, and its chin is black, merging first into cobalt blue and then into a most beautiful turquoise blue, spreading down onto its chest, and finally merging into the brilliant green. Its red tail is also shorter and more rounded. They are found only in the Fuji Islands. The pin-tailed parrotfinch is usually known in aviculture as the pin-tailed nonpareil, an apt name meaning without equal. It is undoubtedly, both in colour and form, one of the most gorgeous birds in the world. Of the parrotfinches, this one is the most common and widely distributed in Thailand, Malaysia and the East Indies. It flocks in large swarms and descends on fields of ripening rice and is sometimes considered a pest. Although it lives for years, when acclimatized, it has proved very difficult to breed. Feeding them paddy rice, which can be moistened, often helps to stimulate their desire to breed, as does housing them in a flock in a warm, humid aviary. The male can be seen on the right and the female is on the left. Pair bonding is strong within the species. The bamboo parrotfinch has a wide distribution in southeastern Asia. This beautiful species is being bred in very small numbers in cabinet cages as well as aviaries, but it is very tropical and requires an environment of a minimum temperature not much below 15 degrees centigrade and a high humidity of about 60% to thrive successfully. Bamboo parrotfinches will only successfully rear their young if regular supplies of live food are provided. Over 40 species of little finches in which the spectacular colours of red, green, yellow and blue are lacking, but are yet blessed with great beauty through their infinite variety of intricate patterns in shades of brown, grey, black and white. They are currently lumped in a supergenus that bears the scientific name Lonchura, derived from two Greek words that mean spearhead and tail, and refers to the pointed tails that is a feature common to them all. Very typical of the group is the rare Malaccan munia from Java and southern Sumatra. As with virtually all the species of munia, there is minimal diachromatism between the sexes, so one cannot easily be sure of having a true pair. Because of this, and the fact that manakins or munias are among the most sociable of all birds, and always live and breed in flocks, they are best housed as several pairs together in an aviary. Always make sure you never mix the species, because they will very quickly hybridize. The spice finch is another very common and widespread species from Southeast Asia. The spice finch is a beautiful bird with shades of rich brown with intricate scalloping, one of the real old stalwarts in foreign bird keeping. It belongs to the large manakin or munia family and has all the characteristics of that group: hardiness, longevity of up to 10 years or more, difficulty in distinguishing the sexes, and a willingness to raise young on a minimum of live food, provided a pair are being housed together. For this reason, keeping a flock in an aviary is the best possible procedure. Another of a large munia family is the black-headed nun. An exceptionally sleek feathered bird, it always looks immaculate in black and tan. They are accepting to all other birds in an aviary and will live for many years. Because they dwell in reed beds in the wild, their toenails are constantly being rasped as they cling to the abrasive stalks. The thing they may suffer from in aviaries is overgrown toenails, which may need frequent clipping. Being inexpensive and seldom housed in small flocks, they are not bred as often as they should be. The cockbird has a slightly larger head and bulkier bill. A very similar species is the white or silver-headed nun. Its white head shading to grey and dark brown body has led it to being given the apt name of the cigar bird. The cockbird has a snow-white head, whereas in some cases the hen, as seen here, will have an off-white head. Munia species should not be housed together because they are likely to crossbreed and the offspring are fertile. It is important to keep breeding stocks pure. Live food for both the black-headed and silver-headed nuns when breeding is not necessary, provided there is lots of sprouted seed. Live food may, however, be given for additional protein when the parents are rearing their young. The black-throated munia from Java was always rarer than the other Asiatic nuns, and consequently much sought after. It was referred to colloquially as the Javan marja. They are just as long-lived and willing to breed when housed in a small flock in a reasonably sized, well-planted garden aviary. This is a particularly fine male example. The female would be very similar, so one can only be sure of having a pair if they have been surgically or DNA sexed. Given the relative shortage of this species in the country, this is the perfect species for specialization. The Java sparrow, which also cannot be sexed with the naked eye, is commonly bred in cages and aviaries the world over, and it is a beginner's bird par excellence. They have recently become a vulnerable species in their restricted habitat of Java and Bali. They are not by nature aggressive birds, but having such heavy beaks and being so robust, they are liable to inflict damage on smaller, weaker species, so are best housed separately in colonies or in single pairs in a small aviary or cage. As they are not good nest builders, they must be provided with boxes, hollowed logs, calabashes, or other receptacles. The closest relative to the Java sparrow is the Timor sparrow, an equally lovely bird. Their restricted habitat in some of the lesser Sunda Islands is more remote than their Javan relative. Neither species are actually sparrows, and were only called such because they were once so common in their natural habitats. Both the Java and Timor have been classified as birds belonging to the Munia and Manakin genus of birds. The Timor finch has now also been declared vulnerable. good news is that a prominent South African avicultural researcher has successfully bred many Timor finches in cabinet-type cages. Another beginner's bird on a par with the zebra finch is the Bengalese. Developed by Japanese bird breeders over several hundred years. They are easy breeders in a cage or aviary, but only one pair should be housed in any type of facility, because they are such sociable birds that they will all pile into the same nest if they can. They are the world's best foster parents for raising the young of other seed eaters. They are often kept solely for this purpose. They are almost exclusively seed eaters, and therefore cannot be used to foster any finch species that require much live food. An Asiatic finch that is neither a munia nor a parrotfinch is the charming red avidavat, which is one of the very few waxbills found outside Africa. It is the only waxbill where the male has a summer breeding plumage in dark red, offset with spectacular white dots, but assumes a dull form plumage similar to the females during winter. They are common and widely distributed in southern and eastern Asia. Their rather strange name comes from India, where they are the most popular cage bird. Provided they are given a reasonable amount of live food, they are not difficult to breed. All the European finches are predominantly seed eaters. They are generally willing to breed in quite small aviaries or even cages. Their beautifully shaped cup nests, in which they lay bluish eggs speckled with brown, predispose them to disturbance from other aviary inhabitants, so they are best housed in single pairs to small outdoor aviaries. Their seed diet must also be varied with some more specialized seeds like hemp, teasel, rape, lettuce, gold of pleasure sesame and perilla. Pride of place among the European finches is generally allocated to the dainty and colourful goldfinch. It is the most colourful of all the European seed eaters, and it must rank as one of the most fascinating birds to mankind, because it is the only bird to have been released and to have firmly established itself in a wild state in certain areas of every major continent of the world. Goldfinches in particular need some seeds of high oil content like Niger, linseed, and poppy seed, and seldom survive very long without these treats. Furthermore, the importance of some soaked seeds and a frequent supply of green food in the form of seeding grasses and weeds like dandelion, groundsel, chickweed, cosmos, cornflower, etc. for all the European seed eaters cannot be overemphasized. Easiest to breed of all the European finches is the greenfinch. The sexes are easily distinguished because the females lack the brightness of their mates, especially as the yellow-wing bars, which also incidentally show their very close relationship to goldfinches. Greenfinches do well on a seed diet that includes canary and rapeseed, with a daily allowance of sunflower seed, preferably soaked. They are the hardiest of all the European finches, yet the young ones are very susceptible to enteritis after leaving the nest, until they have molted into adult plumage, and losses are frequent with green finches under a year old.